In Africa, many of us grow up believing that every problem has a spiritual root. From bad dreams to failed relationships. And because of this mindset, countless people fall prey to pastors and spiritualists who exploit their fears. In fact, the story you are about to hear is one of the darkest examples of that manipulation. It begins with a woman who believed she had met her spiritual husband, a shadowy force haunting her dreams, tormenting her nights, and threatening her very chance at physical marriage. But what she didn't know was that her tormentor wasn't a spirit at all. It was something far worse, something that has flesh and blood with greed in its vein. But before we dive into this chilling story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because on this channel we uncover the darkest, most mind-twisting tales that will make you see life differently. And trust me, today's story is one you don't want to miss. The mind, they say, is the easiest place to plant a seed, but the most dangerous garden to let weeds grow. For Amara, the seed was planted by the very man who was meant to be her shelter, her fiancé, David. For nearly a year, she had clung to the gilded dream of a romantic wedding, a union she believed would transform her life, ushering in a future filled with joy and security. But beneath David's charming smile and thoughtful gestures, a different plan was festering. A cold, calculated plot to sever their bond without a trace of guilt, to escape her life without getting his hands dirty. The method he chose would not only end their engagement, but would leave Amara questioning the very foundations of her own sanity. It began subtly, with whispers in the dead of the night. Amara would jolt awake, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs, drenched in a cold sweat. She was certain someone or something had been pouring water over her head as she slept, the chill of it clinging to her skin. She would recount these strange, unsettling incidents to David, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and confusion. He would listen, his expression a mask of grave concern, but his words were a poison she didn't realize she was ingesting. He would say, "Is a spiritual husband," he did whisper, his voice low and solemn. "They have come for you." The words took root deep within her, brewing into the fertile soil of her deepest fears. They spoke to the ancestral stories she did heard as a child, tales of unseen forces and spiritual battles. Amara, a woman grounded in logic and reasoning, found herself adrift in a sea of dread, clinging to David as her only anchor. Soon the dreams began. They were vivid, they were terrifying, and they were achingly real. She dreamt of a tall, faceless man standing at the foot of her bed, his presence a heavy weight in the room. He would whisper promises of eternal love, his voice a disembodied echo, swearing that Amara was already his wife in the spirit world. When she tearfully confided in David, expecting him to soothe her anxieties, he instead confirmed her worst fears. He spoke of black mambas, of ancient curses woven into her lineage, of unseen battles waged for her soul. He told her she was a chosen one, marked by forces she couldn't possibly escape. And with each whispered word, each faint sign of concern he did and he gave, her prison was meticulously built, brick by brick, in a psychological way. David led her to a spiritualist, a woman named Mama Nike, whose reputation he claimed was built on her ability to see into the spirit world. Draped in layers of colorful beads and clothes, with a gaze that seemed to pierce through the physical world, Mama Nike's voice was low and hypnotic, weaving a spell of false sanctity. As Amara nervously sat before her, Mama Nike nodded gravely. "Yes," she breathed, her eyes wide with a practiced performance of awe and fear. You are married in the spirit. That's why your life has been so difficult. That's why your peace is gone. And unless you obey, this husband will destroy everything around you." The pronouncement hit Amara with the force of a physical blow. It validated every fear, every late-night terror. Mama Nike promised to help, a powerful deliverance ritual that would sever the spiritual ties. But she explained that before she could begin, she needed to see the spirit husband to confirm his existence and his power. That night, during a ritual inspection of Amara's house, a figure appeared in the darkened hallway. He was tall, his body covered in white check, a grotesque mask obscuring his face. The spiritualist pointed with a trembling hand, her voice a terrified whisper. "There! Do you see? He follows you." Amara's breath hitched in her throat and she collapsed to the floor, a guttural scream tearing from her lungs. The nightmares had crossed into reality, and she was certain, very certain, that she was losing her mind. She had no way of knowing that this so-called spiritual husband was merely an accomplice, a man hired for a few naira or a few dollars and a bottle of gin to play a ghost, to scare her deeper into the trap. Her life crumbled slowly, like pepper burning at the edges. She stopped sleeping. Every creak in the house felt like footsteps. Every flicker of light felt like a signal from the spirit world. She began paying the spiritualists more money, desperate to grease her palms, so she continued to fight on her behalf. But no matter how much she paid, the attacks continued. She saw shadows in her mirrors, she felt invisible hands touching her at night, and always the spiritualist would warn her, "If you stop, he will take you." Amara believed. She had no reason not to. Her fiancé grew distant. He grew colder. He began slipping away little by little, spending more nights outside, using the excuse that he was protecting her spiritually. And still, she clung to him, terrified of being alone, terrified of facing the husband without him. The breaking point came when the spiritualist told her the spirit husband demanded a blood pact. That was the only way to sever ties. Amara resisted. She was horrified, but the spiritualist accomplice returned, standing in her living room in the middle of the night later that night, chanting, his shadow flickering across the walls. Amara screamed until her throat tore, but when her fiancé arrived, he only sighed as if disappointed. He told her, "Now you have made him angry." And with those words, Amara broke down. She agreed to the ritual. She caught her palm, dripped blood onto a bowl of water, and whispered the words the spiritualist commanded. From that moment, her nightmares deepened. She dreamt of drowning. She dreamt of being buried alive, her fiancé watching from above with pity in his eyes. She dreamt of a faceless husband pressing cold lips to hers, whispering, "Forever mine." Revelation, when it came, was not a sudden burst of clarity, but a slow, horrifying crawl. It began with a whispered argument Amara overheard between David and Mama Nike. They were in the living room, unaware that Amara had woken up to use the bathroom. "The girl is getting too suspicious." David's voice was low and anxious. "She's asking too many questions about where all the money is going." Mama Nike's voice, usually so hypnotic, was now sharp with irritation. "She will not stop paying. Her mind is already gone. Just tell her the husband is getting angrier. You need to speed up the process. We need to get more money out from her." Amara froze in the hallway, her blood turning to ice. Those words she heard didn't make enough sense to her, yet they made perfect sense. Too many questions. Where are all the money going? The husband is getting angrier. A cold dread began to take hold. But the full horror didn't sink in until a few nights later, when she pretended to be asleep when David came into the room. She felt him hovering over her, a strange metallic scent in the air. As she lay still, she felt a cool, wet sensation on her forehead. With her eyes just barely opened, she saw him, her fiancé David, holding a small bottle. He was pouring a few drops of water over her head, just enough to wake her with a start. The whispers she'd been hearing were real, but they weren't from a spirit. They were from him, a man she had trusted with her own life. The final piece of the puzzle fell into places by pure accident. One evening, Amara was returning home, but she returned early this day, and she found a strange man standing at her door. He was in irregular clothes, not the chalk-covered mask she knew. He was speaking into a phone, but his voice was a low grumble. He was saying, "Yeah, I just got back from her place, but she wasn't home yet. Mama Nike said she did pay me as soon as the job was done." The man looked up and saw Amara. His face was pale with recognition. He was the man in the mask, the spirit husband. He was just a hired actor. He mumbled a quick excuse and he hurried away, leaving Amara standing alone in the doorway, the world spinning around her. Her mind, once a terrifying garden of weeds, was now a desolate wasteland. The whispers, the dreams, the shadows in the mirror, they were all a cruel fabrication. Her fiancé, David, and the woman she trusted for spiritual guidance, and the man who haunted her nightmares were all in one same cruel game. They had fed her paranoia, stripped her of her peace, of her savings, and of her sanity, all for a selfish, twisted scheme. But here is the truth. The worst prison is not the one you build inside yourself. And Amara was now unbreakable. By the time she realized she had been scammed, it was too late. Because belief has power. The more she fed the lie, the more real it became. She still sees him, even after her fiancé abandoned her, even after the spiritualist vanished with all her money, even after the accomplice disappeared into the night. Amara still wakes every night to the sound of water dripping on her head. She still sees the faceless groom waiting in the shadows, the ring of black fire on his fingers, and now she asks herself, was it really just a scam? Or did their lies open the door to something real in me? In the end, she thought she was fighting spirits, but the only demons that haunted her were human. Men who fed on her fear, her faith, and her desperation. And that is the danger of blind faith. That is the danger of blind belief. Once you hand over your mind, you hand over your life. Remember, sometimes the real enemy isn't in the unseen world. is standing right in front of you, smiling, waiting to be paid. Be careful who you run to for help, because not every pastor is holy and not every spiritualist is a savior. So after hearing this, do you still believe in spiritual husbands, or do you still think it's all a scam to control and exploit people? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I really want to hear your perspective. And if you found this story eye-opening, don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more dark and thought-provoking stories. Until next time, be careful who you trust, because not every savior wears white.